Coming up next on Stop the Threat, home invasion is defined as an illegal and forceful entry into an occupied private dwelling with a violent intent to commit a crime against the occupants. Knowing this, you have decided your children are now old enough to be left at home alone on weekends while you run errands. They may be old enough to care for themselves, but are they trained enough to handle a planned home invasion? Stop the Threat starts now. Hello and welcome to Stop the Threat. My name is James Towle. On today's episode, we're taking you to Houston, Texas. I think you're well aware by now of the gun laws in the state of Texas, so we're not going to spend a lot of time with that. But let me ask you this question. Who's in charge when mom and dad is away and the kids are home alone? Have you drilled the children on calling 911, maybe barring themselves behind locked doors? I want you to think about that while I introduce you to this week's panel. Wes Doss, 20 plus years with law enforcement. He is now president of Kyber Interactive Associates and a returning contributor to Stop the Threat. Chris Wolf. Chris has been with law enforcement in the state of Louisiana for 17 years. Bill Duggan. He has been a police officer with the state of Massachusetts for 13 years. So before I get started, for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time or maybe the second time, I just want to remind you that we have a staff that goes around the country and they find real stories that have taken place possibly in your own state or community. And we reenact those, and with the help of professionals such as our panel this week, we look at those and we help you through the decision process of whether or not and when to shoot as opposed to how. With that in mind, I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask Wes, because he is a PhD and he's written several books, one of them in which I have right here, Train to Win. And you know what I like about this is you made this out to me, and I do appreciate that, but I like this in here. Always train to win, always expect to win. You know, that's nice. And so it is a mental thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the, well, I don't think I know, that's one of the most misunderstood and least considered aspects of lethal force situations is that mindset. People assume that it's all mechanical skills. You know, they learn how to shoot and then that's it. That's going to solve all the problems. There's a lot of tricks and a lot of reasons why we do things, and that's the whole idea behind the two books.
And both of you are training officers, okay? So is that part of that mental setup important in your training?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Where it comes to firearms training, the general rule is firearms training is basically mechanical as far as marksmanship goes. Combative skills is the exact opposite. It is more of a mental aptitude. It's a mental game, it really is.
Okay, all right. Well, when we come back, I'm going to ask Bill that same question, because I think it's all about being prepared for a situation when you walk into it. And not only do you need to be able to handle your firearm correctly, but you need to be able to handle it mentally correctly. And I think we would all agree with that. When we come back, we'll talk more about that, and I'll show you part one of the reenactment. Welcome back. We're going to show you part one of the reenactment we call Quick Action. But before we do that, I want to go back and ask the question one more time. Even though your children may be into their teens and you leave them alone, has there been any drill that's taken place in case of any kind of an emergency? It could be fire. I wonder if anyone has spent the time. Do your children know what to do if they're home alone and someone's trying to enter the house?
Well, they did. They're adults now, but as children, yeah, they were briefed and discussed on a regular basis, how to handle things, and if they saw somebody on the property or coming onto the property, how best to handle that.
Okay, what'd you tell the kids?
Sure. I was talking to Chris about drills we do. We put the officers under high stress, so yeah, they can qualify, but can they put their rounds where they need to go under high stress? Same thing with the kids. I did a drill with my kids when they were younger. I haven't done it recently, but they're in their teens. I unplug the phone and make them dial 911 over and over, hit those buttons to build that muscle memory. So under a high stress situation, maybe a fire or somebody breaking in, they can hit those numbers correctly.
Hey, I like that. You actually had them come in there and physically 911 and 911.
Build that muscle memory, sure. Just like we do with the police officers.
Yeah, that's a good idea. How about you?
Had not thought of that. Interesting concept. But yeah, you always have to at least talk about these things, and that's half the battle, is at least having a plan set up. If you're not home, what to do if somebody starts knocking on the door, if they start rattling the doorknob, what do you do next? Where do you go to? What are your next steps? It's always the best to have to be able to talk that out and have a plan set in place.
Yeah, because I think no matter what, as mothers and fathers, and I think you can probably all attest to this, that there have been times when children have been home alone. It may not have been planned that way, but something came up and that was it. And I really like the fact that you drilled them on 911. I think that something has never come up before. I think that's certainly at home. I think that's probably a really good idea. How about behind locked doors? Anything that would go beyond 911? Wes?
Well, that was part of the original plan, was to find a safe place in the house, bunker, call 911, stay there, and guide the police in, stay on the phone.
Stay on the
police
phone.
or fire, obviously.
Stay on the phone. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Well, with that in mind, let me show you part one of Quick Action.
We've been sitting here for an hour. If we wait any longer, they're gonna come back home.
Fine. Let's go.
It's not gonna give. Let's go around back before anyone sees us. That was weird.
Okay, I can see that things are probably going to go awry here pretty quickly. Let me ask you a question, though. If you received a call that two people were sitting in an automobile in a neighborhood for an hour, would law enforcement react to that?
Absolutely.
What would 911? How would they handle that? Would they question the individual or just flip it to patrol?
We get those calls all the time, and sometimes they're private investigators, sometimes they're repo guys.
Right.
They're taking the car away. You go up, you run the plate, you question them, what are you doing here? And usually there's a good answer.
What?
Same thing, and it would have come out as a set of suspicious circumstances. Many times the neighbors are saying, I don't recognize this car, I don't recognize these people. It's kind of a weird time to be sitting in the neighborhood, and generally a patrol unit shows up and finds out who these guys are.
Okay, so then it's not unusual, or no, I don't want to say it's not unusual, but let me rephrase that. You would encourage a neighbor who sees something like this, don't let it go by, call 911.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's all part of it. That is police service. That's proper law enforcement. work right there. A suspicious person, that's why the police are there. Call them up, they'll come over, check it out, no problem.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people who would probably be reluctant to do that. You know, I just go, well, you know, I don't want to call 911. A couple of guys sitting in the car, they could be out there for all those reasons. But I think the point here is that if that happens in your neighborhood, then it's probably well worth the call to 911. In this particular instance, you're going to see that would have been helpful had that happened. I think the other thing I recognize is maybe locking the back fence. I mean, it doesn't look pretty easy access back there. But when we come back, I'll show you part 2, and we'll see what happens. So it'll go away. Welcome back. We've looked at part 1. We've discussed the fact that we want to reassure you that if you see something taking place in your neighborhood that you're not comfortable with, then go ahead and call 911. Let them decide whether you're wasting their time. And I know I've gotten emails from people who are a little reluctant to make that call because they feel uncomfortable with it. But as you look around the table, I think you'll see that all of law enforcement would acknowledge and say, go ahead and call, let us make the decision. We'll be glad to come out, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I don't think 911 is going to question you a lot. They're probably just going to keep you on the phone and flip it to patrol.
Sure, and I also suggest sometimes if you think that 911 isn't kind of hesitant because you don't want to bother them, or maybe it's not quite an emergency, try the business line. Learn the department's business line and call on that.
Well, and even a backup to that might be just calling a neighbor.
Sure.
Right? Call your neighbor and say, hey, you see that car out front? You know, how long has he been? Do you know who that is? Blah, 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 that kind of a thing. And I think the point here is don't let it go. If you don't feel comfortable with something that's taking place in your neighborhood, act on it. Call 911, call your neighbor, do something about it, just don't blow it off. And now I'm going to show you part 2, and we only wish that something had probably happened. Let's watch part 2.
Hey, what are you?
Come here. There's someone trying to break into the house. Over here. Call 911. Here's my phone. I'm gonna go get Dad's gun.
There are 2 men trying to break into our house. I'm here with my brother. He's getting my dad's gun.
It won't budge.
Come on, I'll find something to break the window.
Okay, what's going on?
They're on the way.
Stay here. Move, you get a gun! Ah!
Okay, to the best of our knowledge, that's pretty much how that took place. It appeared to me as though the male in this particular case had some training, at least a drill with his dad or his mom about where the gun is and what to do. Do you see anything there? I mean, there was an obvious threat, right?
An obvious threat. I mean, it seemed like there was a little bit of planning that went into that. He gave the telephone to apparently his little sister, told her to stay on the line. He went and armed himself, and I think he held her in a centralized location in the house. You know, it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances, which apparently it looked like it turned out in the good guy's favor.
Right.
My only problem with that was that he went looking. He went almost to clear the house. They probably should have, my advice would have been to go to a safe room and wait for the police there, lock themselves in a bedroom, bathroom, something like that.
With the gun?
With the gun.
With the gun.
Sure.
Wes?
Yeah, you know, there's a fine line between doing something that's to better or safeguard yourself and then putting yourself purposefully in harm's way. And when you have a security plan in effect where you have a safe room or a closet or something along those lines where you could go and remain until help arrived, versus going in there, because the kid who had no idea whether these guys were armed, they could have been more than the two of them. There could have been several of them. It could have been a completely different set of circumstances, but it's not to say that anything that he did was tremendously wrong. But there's that gray area that separates those two.
Okay, I agree that certainly securing the sister, calling 911, we're all comfortable with that. I'm not sure what the sister actually said to 911, and we don't have any information about it. But I'm sure they rolled a unit when they heard from her. Any child who would call 911, you could probably sense some fear in their voice, and it's not a crank call. This is a pretty serious, so we can all agree that they probably rolled something on that call. Absolutely. Right? Okay. So he secures the sister. I like the idea of going to some other room and closing the door and waiting for whatever might happen to come to you rather than you going to it. But okay, that's not what happened. He actually went on a hunt, as it were, and coming around that corner, the brick breaks the window. That's pretty fearful. Or it might not have been, but it was pretty fearful at that. Brick breaks the window. Now you know someone's coming in. I'm pretty surprised at that point. He continued the hunt after that. I mean, I'm not sure that's normal, but, you know, that was probably some training in his background. And now someone is entering the house, and he doesn't even hesitate to start running off rounds. So I think there's a lot that we can probably argue on that. He reacted based upon the fact that that's some training involved, and I'm sure that's why he did it. I don't know that was absolutely 100% correct, but hey, that's what took place. These are real stories, and we just bring them to you as they occurred and try to furnish as much information as we can. I got to go, so we'll be right back, and we'll come back with more. Thanks for coming back, folks. This is Stop the Threat, and we have just watched part 1 and part 2 of Quick Action. We've discussed the fact that they did a lot of right things. Would anybody want to carry on with this, Wes?
You know what? I think the most appropriate thing was to go back and remain with his sister and let help get there and let the authorities take over. I think it would have been a mistake for him to pursue those guys out into the streets because, again, you're running into an unknown. You have no idea who or why or what.
Did he have the right to shoot?
It depends on what state we're in, but certainly they broke into his house. They're intruders into his home.
Yeah, I would think no matter what state you're in, if the brick came through the window and you come around the corner and someone's actually entering the home, then I don't think there's any objection there to firing. So why is it I'm not comfortable with that? What's wrong here?
Well, again, I think that him going, like you said earlier, going on the hunt, he's exposing himself to unnecessary risk.
I kind of disagree. Where do we draw the line between, because the way the scenario was placed, it's in his home. So as far as I'm concerned, he is not on a hunt. He's in defense of his own property and his little sister. So I know escape, evade, I understand that. That makes good tactical sense. However, when do we say, stop, I'm in my house, I don't have to run away from you? If someone's attacking me and my property and my loved ones and my family, when can I say, stop, you're not coming through this door, I'm not running from you in my own house?
Yeah, you know, and I get a lot of emails about that because we get some criticism from people who say, well, gee whiz, what do I do? Just run and hide every time something happens. When do I get to stand there and defend when it's my, and leave me alone? And I think that's a legitimate kind of objection. But it is risky.
It is risky, and I think maybe the terminology might confuse some people. Is not when do I get to stand and defend my house. This is not a lucky thing. This is a very unfortunate set of circumstances that is going to change your life and everybody that's involved in this forever. It will never be the same if something like this happens, like we're seeing on the reenactment. But again, it's when the threat is posed into your own home. I personally don't think that that you have the duty to retreat into your own home any further than you already are.
No, I don't think the question
Okay.
comes up with that either. I think it's when we're looking at a scenario like this, though, it's what's the most desired state of affairs. What would you prefer? What would we like to see actually happen? And obviously, there's more conducive courses of action that should be taken. I mean, rather than encouraging somebody to immediately go to guns on somebody, because again, you don't even know who's breaking into your home yet.
Yeah, it's always risky to, you know, I would like to follow what you were saying, but it's always kind of risky in the fact that we're dealing with children, number one. I think if we were dealing with adults, I might feel a little more comfortable. Not that I don't understand what you're saying, because I get a lot of those emails to the effect of, hey, I don't have to run from these guys. They're in my home.
Yeah.
Well, a quick point, too, is, and I don't completely disagree with Chris, but you also have to be careful of shooting the wrong person. Somebody forgot their keys and they're coming in. We've heard of those scenarios where they're coming home late at night and, oops, I shot the wrong person. But I also agree with, you know, you're defending yourself. So.
Right. Okay, well, again, we could go on for quite a while on this subject, and I know I've gotten a lot of emails concerning this sort of thing, and I do appreciate the fact that we've had a chance to at least say something about it, but we got to go. I'll see you again next week. Be safe, be trained, be alert.